The medical medium can talk to spirit, but he is not a real doctor. If he can tell me anything about my psoriasis and how to fix it.
Looking for the problem. With you, it's definitely the liver. You have really high deposits of copper. That's a dermatoxin, so that's a poison that's floating to the skin. So celery juice is gonna neutralize that copper. Your psoriasis will start going away, and that's why I want you on it.
Welcome to Influence to Death, your guide for navigating the wild world of wellness influencing. Hi, and welcome to Influence to Death. My name is Victoria Lafont.
I'm Hannah Wright.
Oh, right. And we need to say.
Oh, yeah, we need to say.
I'm Victoria Lafont. How do we even say it? I'm Victoria Lafont, MS, HMFM.
I have a master's of science.
Yeah, we have master's degrees. Our master's degrees are obviously not in media. We got great feedback from a listener that was like, hey, why don't you all provide your information to listeners so they know you aren't just two jamokes with mics? It's a great piece of feedback. We both have master's degrees, and actually I am still a TA at that school. So yeah, I'm on the faculty of a graduate program.
Yeah, our degrees are in human nutrition and functional medicine. We're also both nutritional therapy practitioners. And I have an undergrad in psychology, which I have used. I've worked in mental health field. What else?
I don't have an undergrad in anything impressive at all. Basically, when I went through my undergrad, they were like, how can we get her out of here? And that is a true story. There were only 3 of us in the history of Murray State University who ever graduated with a BA in liberal arts.
They just made up a degree for you?
Yes, they did. It's me and my best friend's brother. Hey, Evan. And our other friend, Katie. And we all graduated with that degree. My minor is in music. I was an opera singer until I decided to drop out of school and go hitchhike around the West Coast.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I just got my BA. I remember actually graduating, or being done with my coursework and throwing away my exit research paper into the dumpster on my way out, because I was like, I'm never coming back to higher education, and then 10 years later, I was like, I think I want to get my graduate degree. So never say never.
Here we are.
Is the point of that. Okay. So yeah, we got a little bit of education, and we've done continuing ed, mainly what I think both of us have studied more than anything is research analysis. And I've taken an interest in statistics. We've looked a lot at how to interpret statistics in research papers. So that's our background information. Yeah. What do you say? Victoria Lafont, MS. Does anybody say that?
I don't know. Somebody does.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay.
All that is to say, if you guys want to find out more about us and our personal, education and qualifications, you can find us on our Substack.
Yeah. Influence to Death on Substack. I think it's Influenced Pod at Influence Pod on Substack. Yeah. And then we're on Instagram at Influence to Death. And you can email us and ask questions or give us episode ideas. It's influencetodeath@gmail.com. And it's great to hear from you all. I love getting emails from listeners. Yeah. It's super interesting. So we got some education. Okay.
So today we're both pretty nervous about this episode because we're going to be talking about the medical medium.
Yeah. We don't want to get sued.
Yeah. Because that does happen. And that may be why there's not more stuff like this out there. Because people perhaps have tried and they get shut down. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I will preface everything we're going to say today is what we think is happening.
Right.
We can't know because we haven't talked to Anthony William, the medical medium, but Hannah especially has done an incredible amount of research for this episode. And I have stepped back because I don't want to have a stroke. So I get really, really angry when I read his information.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll get into the details as the episode goes on.
And we'll do our regular format of the 4 questions. What's the history? What's our bias? What's the proof? And is it worthwhile? Or the takeaway, I guess. Probably be more of a takeaway in this one, I guess.
Yeah.
Is it worthwhile? Yeah. So I'm gonna preface all this by saying that he is an influencer, Anthony William, the medical medium. He has a huge presence on Instagram. What, 4.8 million followers, you said, Vic?
Yeah, because
I can't see his Instagram because he blocked me many years ago.
Are we going to the bias part now? Is that what we're going to talk about? Yeah. Hannah was like, how many followers does he have?
Yeah,
and I was like, wait, you can't see it? No, you can't.
Yeah.
I think that's a badge of honor, Hannah, but
thank you. I was proud of myself. And I'll tell you why, because I would get a lot of questions about him on my Instagram when I used to do a lot more take questions from people. And usually I was very candid about what I thought. And because of that, I tagged him in my response and promptly I was blocked. So I'm assuming that probably happens to a lot more people than myself. And we'll talk more about the kind of drama behind people who have tried to take a stand to kind of call him out for what they believe to be wrong and kind of what happens with that. So, but I guess let's start with the history as best as we can find. The first thing I'll say, because I'm guessing some people know who he is and some people don't. He's pretty well known. And you might also just know the celery juice thing. Like he is the person who made celery juice like extremely trendy. But from his website, so this is what he has said about himself. And I'm just going to read this for someone who isn't familiar with him. Medical medium is Anthony William. He's the chronic illness expert, originator of the global celery juice movement, hosted the Medical Medium podcast. He's written all these books. Here is the key part of this information. Anthony was born with the unique ability to converse with the spirit of compassion, who provides him with extraordinarily advanced healing medical information that is far ahead of its time. Since age 4, Anthony has been using this gift to see people's conditions and tell them and their doctors how to recover their health. Essentially, he diagnoses people, even though that is illegal because he does not have any medical training, nutrition training. He's got no training to diagnose. I mean, even as nutritionists, you can't diagnose someone, but
even with the MS, we can't.
Right. There's nothing, but he does do that. And he says that his unprecedented accuracy and success rate as a medical medium have earned him the trust and love of millions worldwide, along them movie stars, rock stars, billionaires, professional athletes, and countless other people from all walks of life who couldn't find a way to heal until he provided them with insights from above. He also claims that he's an invaluable resource to doctors and the scientific community, who he references quite frequently, who need help solving their most difficult cases. So he is the one that is helping advance medicine because he can communicate with a higher spirit who gives him information that has not yet been discovered by medical science. That isn't part of the quote, but that's what I have gathered from listening to him talk about what he provides and the things that he does. He published his first book, as far as I can tell, in 2015. So it actually wasn't that long ago. Like,
he's got 8 books?
Yeah, he's got 8 books. First book published in 2015, and by now he has 4.8 million followers on Instagram. He is on Goop, the Gwyneth Paltrow health site. He's considered a trusted expert, which I believe has been debated by actual medical professionals because he doesn't have what most people would say is expertise as far as medical training or clinical experience working with patients for any length of time. He is on the New York Times bestsellers lists. And I mean, honestly, when researching this, his work and all of his claims are prolific. Like, there's just too much to cover in one episode. If you haven't already and you're interested, you can. I mean, I don't really feel super comfortable directing people to him for any type of advice. But if you're just curious, like, who is this guy? His website has all this information. He has multiple ebooks, free ebooks you can download on everything. He is chronic illness is his niche. That's what his focus is. It's his focus.
I know bias is not up yet, but I think it's let's just do a favor to our listeners, or Obviously, if you have any amount of like perception, you can tell we have a pretty strong negative bias.
Yes.
I wouldn't even say against, just like around his work. And I don't even know the man. But yeah, we have a really hard time with this work being put out into the world in the way that it is put out into the world. So I'm just going to say that out loud, because I think at this point we are saying a lot of this like tongue in cheek or like that, trying to give you an idea of who he is. But he's difficult for us to stomach.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Yeah.
So all of that is his kind of public presence. I try to find anything on his history of schooling, history of where were you before you in 2015 where you published your first book. And everything I found is kind of pieced together from little bits and pieces, like some public records for businesses, some newspaper clippings. I even called up a friend of mine who works in intelligence gathering, and I was like, is it possible that this guy has just scrubbed everything off the internet? Because I can't find anything. And she basically said that if he has enough money, then yes, he has done that. If you're having that hard a time finding stuff. She helped me out and did a search, and she said that she couldn't even find an email address for him ever listed on any form from the late 80s until now. And so she said that's kind of an indicator that it has been calculated to not put anything out there that could lead back to him, or just try to make it really hard to find stuff on him, basically. Which I'm not super surprised about.
It does seem like he has a very curated online presence. Like he has one of those Instagram accounts where it's like he literally has over 4 million followers and he's following 0 people. Like it is for business purposes, is what I generally tend to think when I see a very curated presence like that. It's hard to find any type of negative review or negative feedback about him. And sort of what broke through that was the Vanity Fair article. Actually, I do not know the man's name that published that article. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he was published in Vanity Fair. That's, to me, like the number one and one of the only negative pieces of media that you can find about medical medium.
Yeah, like a large piece of media. There are people like us who have written blogs, and we'll talk about one of those, like other healthcare practitioners or, medical people who've said, hey, this guy, don't trust him. Like, this is not good advice. But they're usually not getting a lot of hits on Google, I don't think. So.
Yeah, he has a very large presence on Google. And so it kind of makes it even more interesting that it's hard to find an email address associated with him.
Yeah, it is. So he does have multiple LLCs, Medical Medium LLC, Medical Medium Management LLC, both active in Florida. Also, this is just a weird detective tidbit, but both of those LLCs are registered to a packing store, kind of like a UPS store or something like that, with like maybe a PO box. I'm not sure. And based on the information I got from a friend of mine who works in private investigating, or the best way to describe it, she said it's not insanely uncommon to have the address registered in that way, but any corporate case that she's worked, there's usually a reason why it's not associated to the person. And so it's like a separate thing, basically, so the person can't be found. And maybe that's just because he wants to protect his privacy, because he's has such a big public presence. Like, totally, that could be completely
but
valid.
To your point, like the most, like we have an LLC associated with the building that we own and the businesses that we own.
Most people do.
It's like our name. Yeah. It's like very easy under my husband and I's name. So yeah.
Oh, he has another LLC too called Anthony William Inc. So he has 3 active LLCs, all in the wellness field, which is interesting. And an expired one called Well Nexus LLC that used to be active also in Florida. So everything is kind of seems like it's based in Florida. Although he claims he does not live in Florida, that he lives in California, but there's no information for him from California. So I'm not sure. I think he is from Maine, as far as I can tell. I did find some old newspaper clippings from around 2000, because in 2000, he owned a health food store in Maine, in Machias, Maine, called Good Earth Organic Market. He owned it with his wife, who's Rachel Schutzman. And in the show notes, you can see these newspaper clippings basically talking about, kind of like saying, hey, these are the new owners of the store, and it has a photograph of them. And I found another clipping on Reddit where someone had taken a photo of it. And I'm guessing it may be from the same article, but it basically talks about his background in supplements and kind of wellness. As far back as 1985, it says he began his career educating people about the use of supplements and herbs for natural healing in 1985. It also says that he studied at the Institute for Food and Health in New York, and he was a student of holistic teachers and chefs Anne-Marie Colbin and herbalist Christopher Hobbs and Cascade Anderson Geller. And it said at that time in 2000, he was a whole food coach. And then it also talks about his wife maybe studying naturopathy, but the newspaper article is cut off. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting that apparently in 2000, he was telling people he had that background. But now, fast forward, he is not mentioning that. Like, there's no mention of, usually a wellness person on their About Me page has like, this is what I study. This is my background. This is based on my credentials, so you can trust me. Like, this is, and he doesn't have that. The only thing he has is that I can communicate with the spirit of compassion. So it's kind of separating him from all of us other folks who had to go to school to study and research on our own. It's like he doesn't need that because he has the higher power telling him what's what, and you can trust him because
Hannah, I'm into this. Actually, like, it would be so much easier if we just had like a research spirit just whispering statistical analysis into our. Can you? Maybe that's what we can evolve AI into. Is
yes,
spirit. I would like the spirit of research to contact me if you're out there.
Bluetooth headset.
Okay, I don't want to get too catty.
Yeah. The other thing I came across as far as his background, and this is from a Reddit thread, I have no idea of how accurate this is, but someone mentioned how they got the information. I don't know, that he, in addition to the nutrition and herbalism and all that he studied, he also studied religion, which I found very interesting given what his current kind of thing
his bent is. Yeah. I mean, I'll say, like, I heard about the celery juice trend come up probably, 5 years ago, like probably near COVID, like the COVID pandemic, when it was really, people were isolated and quarantined and like that. But also because we had students at the Nutritional Therapy Association that were asking questions about it. And then it just kind of went off my radar because I was like, it's interesting. I think this is why I've blocked it out, not only because it's upsetting to me from a disinformation point of view, but because it's like when we're working, when we're like creating content or like, it's like we read a lot and like that. It's like there has to be a part of our brain that's like, okay, this information I'm going to take in and this information I'm not. Like, as Andrew and I were listening to his podcast, and so Hannah's been sending me like, you have to listen to this, you have to listen to that, because it's been hard for me to research for this episode. We'll listen to it. We're like in the car listening, and I'm like, Andrew, don't let this information in your brain. This is just for like entertainment purposes. It's not to actually incorporate into our lives. I think that's the stance I took when I first heard about him. And then it just like basically went away until I read that article in Vanity Fair. I'm going to look up that author's name right now.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I was listening to the podcast. I had never listened to it until we started planning for this episode. And we'll play a clip from his podcast because it's very different, I would say, than anything I've ever heard before. But I was listening to it in one room and my husband was in another room. And he could hear, I guess, just like the cadence of the sound. And he was like, "What are you listening to? It sounds like a preacher, like a preacher's cadence of the hypnotic kind of like something that evangelical like preachers will use the way they speak." And he grew up in a super very Southern religious like household, and so he recognized that sound.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I did not grow up in a religious household, so I wasn't, and I was like, that's very fascinating that you heard that and you didn't know what it was, and you recognized just that what would it be called, the tempo or the
cadence, the pattern.
cadence?
Yeah. And that is, to his point, it's like that's part of the deal, I think, right? Like I've just seen that, because people would speak to how Obama would give speeches, and he had this like rhythm and cadence, and they would liken that to a preacher.
And I think it's taught. Like you can learn. So I did a Google search and I was like, can you learn how to do hypnotic speak? I think I was like, what would you call this? And you can learn, be trained in how to do that. So
I just wanted to say this article that we're referencing in Vanity Fair, and God, the show notes for this episode are going to be just pages and pages long. But this article that kind of put medical medium on a more large scale, awareness was by Dan Adler, and it was published in April of 2023. That's when he really came into my consciousness again, medical medium. So I just wanted to give Dan Adler.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan Adler.
Due credit. Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah.
So, oh gosh, like I said, it's just so much. I think Anthony William, or medical medium, he's best known for his really hyperbolic claims about the curative properties of celery juice and about the Epstein-Barr virus and how it causes pretty much any disease. And so reading from people's like what they say on, in Reddit threads for medical medium community and medical medium skeptics both. And a lot of the skeptics are people who were in the community and left the community. And kind of saying that Epstein-Barr virus is like this very fearful thing because they know from Anthony Williams' information, it causes all these problems: thyroid disease, breast cancer, autism. Just the list goes on and on. Infertility, menopause symptoms, like anything. It's because of this virus. And we're going to talk more about Epstein-Barr virus and if there's any truth in that statement, which will be pretty cool. So something else I've noticed from reading his stuff and listening to him is that he just makes up shit. Like he makes up his own definition and scientific explanation for his claims. It is the most wild thing I have ever seen. And the thing is that he says it with such it's kind of like Wiley Brooks talking about breatharianism and like how it works. He is so confident and like sure spoken. And it's kind of like a little bit, sciencey and kind of these terms, but a layperson, that just means like someone who does not have a background in biology or science or nutrition or medicine or whatever. They don't know. And so it's like someone, if they were talking to me about like how electricity works or something, and they're like telling me all this these big words and they're totally making it up. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Because I don't know anything about electricity and how it works. You know what I mean? Like, and so he makes this stuff up and he claims with celery juice, for instance, and that it can cure chronic disease. And he detailed these mechanisms and these processes that explain his claims, but he insists that the scientific community just has not discovered them yet. And he knows about them because the spirit of compassion tells him. So it's like he is decades ahead of science. And so he's making up this stuff and he's like, well, you haven't heard of it because no one's discovered it except for me. And he talks about undiscovered viruses and physiology behind chronic diseases that he says this is how it works, but no one knows yet. And basically, the thing that kind of I think is very unique is that all of this is woven into these little snippets of actually pretty solid, holistic kind of health advice that is kind of like foundational. Like maybe it's what he was taught from the people he studied under. I would not be surprised, because it's like these kind of like standard things, and so you're like, okay, well, that's common sense. So maybe this other stuff is true too. It's kind of this.
It's that point, I think, that comes up in these episodes where it's like, how do you separate the wheat from the chaff?
Yeah. And it's hard with him because it's super interwoven and linked. And so it is difficult. And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I think it works. And I think that's one of the reasons he has gained such a large following.
Right. It's like when you tell somebody to try and lessen their intake of processed foods, like to eat whole foods, or you put here like avoid alcohol, like that. It's like, yes, fantastic.
Yeah.
What this brings up for me is like, okay, then you put in like, you have to drink celery juice or create these. There's like these raw juice shots, like a shot glass, a shot that he wants people to take. And then on the website, it's like the vegetables and the fruit have to be juiced in this certain order. Like if it's not juiced in a certain order, then it doesn't work the same. And then you have to drink it on an empty stomach. Like all of these, like not only is the claim outrageous, but then the process around it is outrageous. And then you pair it with, he's speaking to people who are stuck in we've talked about this, right? The vacuum created by the lack of chronic care offered by our current model. And they are completely vulnerable because they're trying to find answers. And I think this is, Hannah, like probably the recipe that led us to think like, what connection does this have to a cult?
Right.
We're not a cult podcast. We're not even really like a calling out specific influencers podcast. This particular one just happens to be so egregious that I think both of us were like, we're going to name him. We're trying not to be dicks, truly. But I think like the claims and the patterns that we're seeing, it's like he is a huge public presence. He does need to be called out by name. And there are a lot of characteristics that overlap with a cult. And that article that we were looking at, this man, Joe Navarro, was he CIA or FBI? I can't remember what.
FBI.
Yeah. So he's like ex-FBI, was, like an FBI trainer. He has this list of typical traits of pathological cult leaders. And as we were looking at this list, we're like, this Venn diagram is almost turning into a perfect circle. Like there's so much overlap between the medical medium and the traits of a cult leader. It's hard to differentiate.
Yeah. One of the things he wrote that stood out to me where it really, I was like, whoa, this is what it is. This is a quote from Joe Navarro. And he said, in regards to cult leaders that he's studied and helped profile, they have all had an overabundant belief that they were special, that they and they alone had the answers to problems, and that they had to be revered. They demanded perfect loyalty from followers, and they overvalued themselves and devalued those around them. They were intolerant of criticism, and above all, they did not like to be questioned or challenged. And all of those things that he said are hitting every point, I feel like, that we're going to make in this episode of things we've noticed with medical medium. And
there's one on the list has magical answers or solutions to problems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Man, yes. It's so blatant. Yeah. And you wouldn't know unless you know to like be aware, and obviously you're always surprised by the type of people that are susceptible to cults. Like that's something that's always fascinated me. And one of the key things is that it targets vulnerable people. And that could be anybody for whatever reason. But in this instance, and I'm not saying that medical medium is a cult leader, I'm just saying there are some parallels between like these two things.
There's more than not. There's more.
Yeah, there's more than not. Yeah. He definitely, I feel like he does target the chronic illness population, like people with chronic illness. And like you said, these are people who are not being helped by the conventional and sometimes even the functional medicine, like, and they're left, they're like desperate because it's so hard to be sick all the time and have it basically ruin your life. It takes your life away from you, and you will do anything to try to feel better, like anything at all.
Yes.
You'll try anything. And we have some stories that we'll share of people talking about this with him, where it was like they didn't know what else to do. So they're going to at least maybe try this guy who can talk to a spirit and the spirit can help. And why not?
Yeah. I mean, Hannah, the thing that comes up for me is like, thank God I didn't have like a debilitating chronic illness, but I had extremely severe rosacea that no one could diagnose. I went to multiple conventional dermatologists. I've even still, when I go to the dermatologist for my like old lady mold check, I'm like, hey, what do you think about rosacea? It's like the same answer every time. And then I paid a functional practitioner. I don't even know at this point what those words fully mean anymore, but like a holistic practitioner who had like gut testing and food sensitivity testing, all this, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It made very little difference, so it's like, it is a good point to bring up. We're not saying that you're just going to like flip over to what even may be seen as a really respected alternative clinician and get results, and that he's so far off from really any of these paradigms. It's that when people have an issue, I mean, I'm a perfect example. I did so many crazy things, and they weren't crazy to me at the time because I was desperate. Yeah, I don't know exactly how to get to the point of that other than when you are in that position, you will pay a lot of money and you will believe a lot of what anybody says to try and find relief. And this is, I think, an interesting point. On the surface, celery juice doesn't seem like such a big deal, or drinking raw juice. I'm actually pro raw juice. I have a juicer.
100%.
It's wonderful. Fantastic. Great. I'm also pro, why do brownies always come up? I feel like on these episodes, I'm like, I did have brownies for breakfast again today.
Again?
Yeah.
I need to come over to your house.
You're welcome anytime, because it's like my caffeine, it's my little hit of theobromine. Anyway, so yeah, it's like, I'm not saying that I'm against these things. Celery juice isn't a big deal or like that, but it's like when you push it to this extreme and you say that it's like there's these rules around it, it has to be done this certain way, and that it's like wrapping up all of this like nonsense around what are just like pretty solid ideas. It gets very confusing, and then you pair that with a vulnerable population. And
it starts to create this fear, which I've seen reading people who've left the community talk about, and probably still people who are actually in his community, just saying like, what if I do it this way? Is it going to hurt me? Or if I don't do this, or I'm afraid of this, like he's instilling fear in people. And that is a very, not only is it wrong, it's beneficial to him, because then he is the one that has all the answers for anything.
And it's coming from a totally unprovable source.
Right. Yeah. And
it's like,
no one can question it because he's the only one who can hear it and translate the information. Let's think, I'm not even going to go to religion studies, but whatever, we'll just leave that.
And this is the part I think that as we talk through this more, I can just say it now. It's like, as we listen to him and hear the way that he speaks, and like you said, you heard these like certain snippets of interviews, what comes up for me is like, this man is mentally ill. I'm not at all certified to make a diagnosis of that. It just looks so off that it's like, God, in my 42 years on earth, like I have unfortunately been around friends and family that have mental illness. This is what it looks like. The difference is that there are so many people that follow this man's advice, and he has created a religion around it.
Yeah. And it's enabling whatever is going on. I agree. I have some experience working with mental illness and having personal experience with it. And like, that's what for a while, like researching this, I was like, is he, or is he pretending? And like, it's like all part of a marketing scheme, basically. Yeah. It's hard to tell, but the more I've watched him speak and listened to him speak, like that's kind of the direction I'm going in. And I would love to have someone who is
professional,
the professional, to like break it down and give their opinion. That would be just so insightful.
And the like, this is the fine tip. He is making a lot of money. A lot of money. So
so that's what I actually missed that from the history. Can't believe I missed that. Before he was writing books, before he had his website, his Instagram following, he was doing phone consultations, maybe in person at some point. It's really hard to find information on this. He would charge between $300 and $500 for a 30-minute phone consultation in which he assured you that he would be able to diagnose you, or Spirit would be able to diagnose you. And then he would give you a plan of what to do to heal your illness. And apparently he had thousands and thousands and thousands of people he was doing this for on waiting lists. And I'm willing to bet that all these people were chronically ill, or had a family member that was chronically ill, or perhaps dying, and they wanted to know how to save themselves or their loved ones. And he stopped doing that at some point. I don't know why. I don't know if it was because of the volume was too much. I also wonder if it was because he started to become more well-known in the world, and he started to become accused of practicing medicine without a license. And maybe his attorneys advised him to stop doing that and then switch to books and public speaking and all these other events that he does. I think but he still does. At the beginning of the show, we played the clip from Kim Kardashian. Like, I think he's still like, sees people in that capacity. It's just like maybe different. And obviously he has a huge celebrity base that are giving reviews for him. So all that said, do you want to talk about some of his claims and nutrition claims?
Totally. This is again, a lot of these I'm like, cool, great.
Yes,
eat more whole foods. That's fantastic. Make sure you get enough sleep, Anyway, this is, I think, maybe the core idea that comes up in many of our podcasts that is coming up here is it's going to be hard to separate, but we're here for you to separate. I think it's pretty clear at this point, if we want to just reiterate, our bias is that this man really, I feel like he's dangerous based on the amount of influence that he has. And the Vanity Fair article by Dan Adler, which we'll discuss, it really,
it's so well
brings that home. And it's very sad. So, and I think, just to also make sure, I'm not sure if we said this, his full name is Anthony William Coviello. So Anthony William is, I guess it's his first and middle name, maybe.
I don't know. That's another thing. So it's listed. That's my friend was talking about that, and she said it was hard to find because it was unclear what was his last name. It could be William. It could be Coviello. I don't know. I don't know which one it is. I also will say that it appears that he was working for a really long time. And I think there was a quote in an article about him from someone who used to know him. And I can't recall, it might have been in the Vanity Fair article, that he really wanted to be famous. And it took years. I mean, it wasn't until 2015 that he had his first book, and he had the health food store in 2000. And so it was a long time for him to work and work and work and do the consultations and be on YouTube and do art, interviews. But his goal, based on that information, was to become famous and well known and very influential.
Notorious is the word I would use.
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say his two main claims are the celery juice and the Epstein-Barr virus. That's probably how you've heard him.
Yeah, he has a list of foods that are the dirty foods, or whatever, the foods you cannot eat, or the things that are making us all sick. He does not recommend eating foods that, according to him, feed viruses, including eggs is a big one. He says eggs feed the Epstein-Barr virus because Epstein-Barr virus was originally cultured in eggs. Now, that brings up a point that I have not found anything that directly says this, but there's a lot of insinuation that viruses are man-made and created in a lab and then put out there. That's kind of like the vibe I'm getting. I'm not sure. I mean, the Epstein-Barr virus was discovered in 1964, 65, but that's like when it was isolated and like figured out that's what it is. I mean, who knows how long? Viruses are old, as far as I know. I mean, I don't know a lot about them, but from what I can tell, all of his protocols for all the different diseases kind of are similar. And that usually is kind of a stricter vegan diet with mostly like fruit being really heavy, lots of celery juice. He does say in interviews that like, he's like, you can eat meat. Like, it's fine. Like he has this kind of duality of being like very laid back, being like, yeah, everything's cool. Like kind of this hippie like dude. And then seeing these protocols that are like super strict and like there's a lot of fear around eating things that aren't on the list. So it's a little ambiguous, but as far as I can tell from people talking about doing them, it is really strict and it's hard. And some people, you know, don't do great, obviously, if you're removing like all these foods. Some of the claims that he makes that are mind-boggling because, again, to be clear, this is made up. He is completely making this stuff up. And he also says that, I just can't. He's like, says that I'm the only one that understands this. The science community doesn't know how this is working. It's like, dude, we do know. Like, we know. There are like,
there's some good clues.
Out. Like, yeah. There are a lot of things we don't know, but like things that are basics we know. So here's one of them. One of them is he claims that dietary fat accumulates in the liver, like any dietary fat. And dietary fat in your diet, like excess, can play a role in fatty liver, but that's not the only thing at all.
Not even close.
So to be clear, so his idea of metabolism is that, this is a quote from him, the idea that your body can switch to burning fat and fuel is flawed. We do not run on fat, we run on glucose. If it were true that we could flip from burning glucose to burning fat, like the keto diet says, then it would be impossible for someone who is overweight or obese to starve. If the ketosis theory is correct, you could take away an overweight person's food completely and they continue to live for a long period of time using their fat as energy, but that's not how it works. Fat does not convert to usable material for our bodies. That's not true.
Well, there is the most famous documented case of this exact event is Angus Barbary, and he fasted for 382 days. He ate no food that entire time, but he was very
overweight.
Yeah,
and
he was
that's exactly what happened is that he can use his fat for fuel.
Yeah, he lost a lot of, I'm not saying that is a safe way to do it. I am saying it was effective. Like it absolutely does work just like that. It's basically the opposite of what he's saying. Yeah, how are all of these people who are eating the ketogenic diet still alive? Are they all just lying?
He also says that the brain is a jellyfish-like organ made of sugar, and goes on to say that there's a highly popular belief today that the brain is made out of fat, and you need a lot of healthy fats to have a good brain. This is misinformation. In truth, there's only a microscopic percentage of fat in the brain. The brain is mostly a jellyfish-like organ made up of sugar. That is misinformation. That is
60% of the brain is made of fat, making it the fattiest organ in the human body.
It is true that your brain uses a ton of glucose. Like, 2/3 of your dietary supply of glucose your brain is going to use.
Yeah, your brain.
But it's not made of glucose.
No. He makes it sound like a delicious candy. A jellyfish like organ of sugar. Yeah, I feel like we should be able to buy those as like gummy candies. Yeah, and these two examples are like two of
many.
So much. It's in the South, we call it diarrhea of the mouth, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming. And, it's like, we've all been around somebody like that, like at the bar or, you're trying to leave the mechanics and they just keep talking as you're driving away and all this stuff's coming out of their mouth. But the difference is those people aren't speaking to millions of people and influencing people who are really sick. So, the big thing that I see about this that is the problem, it's like, number one, the protocols that he's recommending are nutrient rich in some ways and completely nutrient deficient in others. Like we talk about this, I think, before on the podcast. It's like detoxification is a nutrient dependent process. And the number one nutrient that it depends on is protein, is dietary protein. That is sorely lacking in a vegan diet, even a cooked food vegan diet, especially one that is a raw vegan diet. And then, when people talk about physiology or anatomy in ways that are incorrect, I'm just like, I come back to what you're saying. Do we know 100% of what's happening? No, we don't. We know a lot, though. It's almost like personally offensive to me. I think that's part of it. I'm like coming down to the core of it. Like, definitely, like on a public health level, it is offensive to me, and we'll get into that. But like, I'm like, dude, do you know how many hours of our lives we have dedicated to actually studying the way that this works? Like, there's pictures of me, like of us on vacation, and I'm like hunched over, reading whatever, like Nutritional Medicine by Alan Gavey or whatever book I had to read. It's like, I almost want to be like, F you, dude. Are you serious? Like, and the reason that it's important to know this is because people's lives depend on it when they trust you.
Right. And so that's why I put these two examples in here. Like you said, there are so many, but it's like important to know that this guy is just making stuff up.
He's making it
this
up.
Is clearly fabricated, and that he has the confidence to just assume people will believe him is like mind-boggling.
And they do. I think
a level of narcissism.
Do.
Yeah, they do. Because if you don't know the physiology and the anatomy, and you don't know how to Google it or figure it out, like, why not believe him? They trust him, and for his followers, like in the Vanity Fair article, it mentions for the woman who the article is about, like Anthony William was like God to her. He was next to God, like he was all knowing, and it appears that that's how a lot of people view him, and so anything that he says is true. But it isn't, guys. Okay, just to clarify.
Yeah, again, like me and Andrew, we're like driving from Kentucky back to Boston listening to these podcasts, and I'm like, don't let any of this in your brain. Okay, this is just research we're doing for a podcast. Poor Andrew's trying. He's like, okay. Oh my God. He's sharp. Like, he's not like, I was like, not a word. Don't let a word in your head.
So some of the other claims he mentions are about Epstein-Barr virus. I think a lot of his followers are autoimmune people with autoimmunity. And so his whatever, what he says is that autoimmune diseases are caused by viruses, many viruses that have not been discovered yet, but he knows about them, of course. It's not possible for the body to form self-antigens, which is what that's the accepted mechanism behind autoimmune disease. There's also no genetic basis to autoimmune disease, which, based on our understanding of genes and disease, that is completely false.
I wish he'd tell my genetics that, and I could eat weed again. That'd be amazing.
He says there's over 60 forms of Epstein-Barr virus. None of them have been discovered yet, but they will soon, thanks to his knowledge. He also says, and I quote, "Doctors have no idea how the virus operates long term." I'm pretty sure that's not true. And another thing he said that's, I had to figure out what he was talking about, but he says medical communities are unaware that every case of mononucleosis, mono, that most people get, all that is stage 2 of Epstein-Barr virus. And I was like, dude, everybody knows that's mono is caused by Epstein-Barr virus. That's what it is. And so, but he calls it stage 2. So he has Epstein-Barr broken down into, I think, 4 stages. And what he describes as stage 2 is essentially active virus or acute infection. And that is when you get mono. So when you have Epstein-Barr virus And again, I'm not an expert in viruses, but I have read about them and I know a little bit, and anybody can read about them. So if you want to learn, go search, Epstein-Barr virus. We'll put a link and you can read a paper or read info from the CDC or whatever to kind of get an idea of it. But stage 2, that's his term. That's just what he's made up. Basically, when you get Epstein-Barr, it can be silent for a while. And then once it becomes active, you may get mono. Like, not
and
everybody gets it. But
no, not at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is interesting. It's like, I'm just looking at this quote down here. Epstein-Barr virus is spread, I think they think mainly by saliva. Like the medical community, knows that. And he's saying like nobody in the medical community knows this true. And it's like, dude, it's like, on the CDC website. It
is bold. He is bold with his claims. He basically says the scientific community doesn't know that Epstein-Barr causes more things than mono, but they do. We do, and we'll talk about that. The scientific community thinks that Epstein-Barr can only be spread when someone has mono, but medical medium knows it can be spread through saliva and body fluids by anyone who has it. That's also true, and that is very well known.
Well documented.
You can spread it when you don't have symptoms, when you're not sick, and it does stay with you for life, right? Like it's a virus that stays with you. Now, I know we're not in the evidence yet, but I just want to say something that's kind of cool. Up to 98% of the world's population has Epstein-Barr virus.
See, and this is what I think he's doing. This is my theories with Vic, or our hypothesis with Vic, because it's so prevalent. I mean, it's essentially like, let's say 90 to 98%. We've seen different stats and different research papers. So it's like, okay, we're close to 100% of people on Earth having this. It's like, okay, well, then it's like so easy to explain that this is what's causing everything. Everybody has it. Of course, all these people are chronically ill. It's like, it really simplifies the story of a very complex, still under research system, like human health, to a meme. It's like he memeifies things like, well, you just drink celery juice, hun. It's like he makes it so simple. Yeah. And that is, and you've brought this up, I feel like a lot on past episodes, where it's like, that is very relaxing and reassuring to people. And here's the not craziest thing, but just a wild, like, offshoot of this. It is actually effective when we believe that what we're doing is good for us, no matter if there's evidence or not, So it's like, that is one aspect of it, is placebo, which is that. And it's a very cool part of our bodies. It's like essentially our psychology affecting our physical body. It's fascinating. And then there's this other aspect of it. And there's this article that, you and I both looked at, Unmasking the Exploitation Tactics of Self-Proclaimed Gurus. This article it's Dr. Adrian Chavez, where he talks about, it's like, well, of course, if you have something that is like a Epstein-Barr associated issue or an autoimmune disease, like something that is, chronic, and you do change your diet to start eating in this way, you probably will feel better for these different reasons. Like you're eliminating foods that might be, reactive for you, or, you've let go of processed foods or like that. So it's like, there's these different mechanisms that what he is saying might be effective for people, but the memification of it and the like, it's coming, he's a medium. It's like coming from the spirit of compassion. And it's like the stance that he takes around it are so inaccurate. It's inaccurate to the point of people have actually been influenced to death by this guy.
Right.
So,
and to your point, like if he, in curating his image, let's say he wanted to give this information to people, if he didn't have a spirit of compassion to fall back on, and he was just like, yeah, I said it under these herbalists, this wouldn't go anywhere. Like telling someone to drink celery juice to cure their illness, because people would be like, what's your source, dude? Like, we're getting this information. And he'd be like, well, I just have a theory, no one would take that seriously. So he's curated this like impenetrable image and personality that no one can question because
it's from above, quote
Yeah.
unquote, from which actually the hierarchization, I don't even know how to say that, like the hierarchizing, making spirituality into a hierarchy drives me absolutely batshit crazy. But that's how, and on top of the fact that, yeah, it's like, I personally do not believe that he has a spirit of compassion giving him this information. I think he has a spirit of capitalism giving him this. That is my personal belief.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
I have no evidence other than that is what I believe. So those are kind of his two main claims to fame. He's Celery Juice guy and Epstein-Barr virus guy. And yeah, the more I listen to him on podcasts, it's hard to take in when you have just a little bit of knowledge about autoimmune disease or the extreme prevalence of Epstein-Barr virus. And
we didn't mention the sodium cluster salts.
Oh my God. How could we forget?
So that's one of his big explanations for how celery juice is so healing is the cluster salts. That's I mean, I will say it could be possible that we have not discovered this yet. I'm not going to like rule that out. But as far as any scientist can tell, celery cluster salts is a term that he has made up and it's completely fabricated and based on no evidence. So there's that. I like wanted to find evidence for that and be like, oh, this is kind of cool. There actually are. And like, I couldn't find anything.
I wonder if what he does is goes into, again, this is hypothesis with Victoria. We're trying to be very careful, honestly, y'all, because we are afraid we're going to get a letter from his lawyer because this happens to so many people who have anything to say against his teachings. So we're trying to really, and this is the truth. We're crouching it in saying like, this is what we think, or this is what it seems like, which is, like I said, it's totally the truth. This is just what we think or what seems to be happening. I wonder if what he does is he goes just a tiny bit into the research literature and finds these terms that sound like kind of cool or impressive and he pulls them out. The reason I say that is because I did have a paper pulled. It's from a chemistry journal. Like, I'd never access this or very rarely when I'm looking for information about a topic. But the article title is Cluster Salts. Let's see, and mineral acid ions made in and with Bronsted basic ionic liquids and liquid mixtures. Like that term is around. So I wonder if he just like pulls out these little like interesting terms and then incorporates them into his, batshit crazy teachings.
I wonder that too, with the Epstein-Barr virus and cancer claims, because if we're going to, I don't know if we want to talk about evidence. I feel like, there's just so much stuff. But basically, one of his things is he says that Epstein-Barr virus causes cancer. It causes all different types of cancer. And he said that the key part here is that he says that our scientific community is not aware of this yet, but they will be soon because of the information he's providing through the spirit. And I want to be clear that in 1964, a scientist by the name of Epstein, this is the person that helped discover the Epstein-Barr virus, a 1964 paper, which we have linked, entitled Virus Particles in Lymphoblasts from Burkitt's Lymphoma. So basically, the scientist found this virus in tumor cells from cancer. And was like, what is this virus? And it was later found out to be Epstein-Barr virus. And then that began the hypothesis that viruses like Epstein-Barr could contribute to some cancers. And since then, this has been studied, and it is true that Epstein-Barr virus has been implicated in a very small subset of cancers.
It's like nasoesophageal cancer, Hodgkin's lymphoma, which I think that form of cancer, the Burkitt lymphoma is a form of Hodgkin's lymphoma. But yeah, Tony Epstein.
Yeah. So
he's the real medical medium. He's just the medical.
Exactly.
Take the medium out of it. But yeah, how many ever years ago? It's like 80 years ago.
Mm-hmm. So it's not new information.
No. Maybe the spirit of compassion was talking to him, Hannah.
Maybe so. Whispering in his ear.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord. Okay. So I just wanted to talk for a second about, there's just so much. I'm like looking at his notes and like so many things about controversy surrounding him. So there is a whole Reddit thread about like medical medium skeptics, like anti-medical medium, and it's people who were in the community, I think, and like left because it seems like either they started to not feel good with the protocols and were not offered any help, as opposed and like they, basically it's like, you're not doing it right, or you're not doing what I say. Like,
yeah,
there must be some other reason why you're not getting better. Or they like made just like pretty basic questions, like questioning him, and they get just like shut out. So according to a Reddit thread, if someone I think there's like a Telegram channel or some kind of like group channel for medical medium people, and I'm sure there's hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of people in there. If someone disagrees with him in his Telegram group, he calls them a fork-tongued devil, and then encourages other group members to bully that person until they leave the group.
Wow.
I don't know if that's true, but Jesus.
I know.
Really?
This is the thing, is like, it gets to a point where it's like, there are documented statements that he has made that make me think this is totally possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, yeah, this is a second, how do you call it? Like a secondhand account. Yeah. But based on words I've heard come out of the man's mouth, I'm like,
yeah,
it tracks.
Would it be a good time to play his rapping?
Oh yeah. Okay. So this is great. I mean, we played at the beginning, people heard his consultation with Kim Kardashian on Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So she has psoriasis, and she, basically made an appointment with him, and he came to the house. Actually, the most wild part, I think, of that entire clip is that Kanye comes in at the end, and he like does his scan of Kanye West and is like, oh, everything seems fine. Maybe I think he's like, just a little congestion in the liver or something. It's like, yeah, Kanye West was totally fine. Completely fine.
I was curious what happened with Kim after that. So I like Googled, Kim Kardashian celery juice, and I found an article write up basically saying like that she had tried, I guess I'm assuming this was after that encounter with medical medium. She did try doing celery juice for a long time, and she said she got worse and worse. And then she saw a good doctor who diagnosed her with psoriatic arthritis or something like that. And then she started treatment for that. And she was like, I got so much better. So I thought that was helpful. That's interesting. So Medical Mediums podcast, if you ever listen, you may come across these like parts where he's like freestyling kind of. And I don't know what my what is, I guess we're sharing this just because.
Well, this is a great example of what we're hearing. And look, for me, rap away. Cool. That's totally cool. The reason this is hard for me is because it's like mounting evidence of like, there is something that is so off that like, okay, maybe the article in Vanity Fair was really hitting the nail on the head. Maybe these accounts on Reddit are
true,
accurate. Right. When I hear him on this podcast speaking in this way, I'm like, I do really, if I like drop in to how I actually feel, I'm like, this is sad. Like, this man has this issue and he's surrounded by people who are enabling him, and he is making, and his team are making millions and millions of dollars off of people who are just desperate for help, but who he is probably just as sick as they are. It's just mentally.
Right.
And yeah, I feel like, this clip that you're going to play on your computer, and I'm going to I just turned the volume up. Hopefully people can hear it pretty well. Again, this is just another point of evidence of like, is this somebody that you want to trust with your health?
Right. So let's play this. He does this on a lot of his episodes, and it's very serious. I don't think it's meant to be taken lightly.
And then
so
should we play the disclaimer at the end also?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that says a lot.
So this is from
Yeah, go ahead.
This is from episode 53.
Epstein-Barr virus, it's out of control.
Okay, that's it.
The viral hoedown. Get the sheriff. Drive this bug out of town. We're gonna kill that bug and blast it on surround sound. Don't frown. You're blessed, you know why you're unwell. Anyone that doubts you're suffering can rot in hell. A brain screw. Decades of confused doctor gurus. Some people, they were told to not care because maybe their pain was not really there. But that's not true. Their pain was there and real. What about you? Was your pain surreal? Or did your pain years later come down the lane in your life? Were you driving almost insane? Did your latest symptom seal the deal? Were you told you were to blame? Or was it your latest meal? Did your health feel like the game? Send a postcard to yourself that says, hey, I'm moving forward. I'm moving out of its pathway. As it shames me every day. No more hiding, bulb. Come out, wherever you are. And please, let's play. Let me be. There's nothing that's going to stop me from overcoming the mental torture and the symptoms that you gave me, bug. It's time to learn and heal. It's time to get past this trial. It's time to rival the virus and destroy its survival.
Dude, you know what it reminds me of is like, there's like a certain brand of hippie that you find when you go to Northern California or like Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
We used to call them white lighters, where it was like they were so fucking out there. Other people, other white lighters totally could believe them or somehow like they could communicate with each other. But people who could like hold a job down or like have a conversation about like current event, like pretty like middle of the road people, they just sounded like absolute just maniacs.
Oh yeah.
Like
I've met those.
top knot dressed in, all linen, Mayan calendar, conspiracy theorists, like that kind of language and the way he's speaking. I was like, what does this sound like? Why is this familiar? And it's like a lot of them were into raw veganism, cleansing. I just am baffled at that.
Yeah, same. I that definitely surprised me. I was taken off guard when that popped up suddenly in the podcast where he would just start freestyling, and I was like, "What is happening? Is this a funny thing? Like, I don't. This is what is going on?" My brain was just crying.
Should we talk about like this is the serious part? This is like why we're naming him by name instead of just talking about like celery juice, which actually there are some great articles we'll link. People have just written about more of his claims rather than him. People have been hurt because of his influence. Yeah.
So the Vanity Fair article, anyone can read. It's a really good read. I highly recommend it. It is sad. But it is, I guess, doing an honor to the woman, Stephanie.
Stephanie Tissone.
Yeah. And I believe her family has tried to speak out against Anthony William, and they keep getting like censored and shut down. And I think her friend, Ashley Foster, I'm pretty sure, who they were both in the medical community together. I think she also tried and she was shut down, maybe legally. or whatever. I don't know how you would censor someone that much, but apparently that happens a lot. Censoring and silencing, not only on a bullying in the group level, but like a legal level. And so, but Stephanie was, if you read the article, you find she was like his right-hand woman. Like she was like his assistant. She started off as like his, I guess, client, quote unquote, but she did the film consults with him. And they became really close. They knew each other for years. You know, she just go read the article and you'll see. But she ended up passing away from breast cancer, and she was really sick. She wasn't sick when she met him. It was like a gradual thing, and she did not seek treatment because it's what the article says, and her, you know, the quotes from people who knew her. She trusted his word above like all else, and because, you know, she told him that she had a lump in her breast. She told him her nipple was bleeding. She told him like all these things. And I don't think he ever said you shouldn't go to a doctor, but it was kind of minimized as far as being like, oh, it's just your body detoxing, or it's the virus trying to get out of your system, like things like that, as opposed to, you know, they were supposed to be close friends. I think he was probably using her, unfortunately. But she loved him. It was clear, and like thought extremely highly of him. And if my best friend told me these things, I would be like, girl, get your ass to the doctor, like right now. Like I will drive you there myself. We have to deal with this. So yeah.
Yeah. The story is absolutely tragic. It's really, really tragic. And honestly, Hannah, I think that after reading this article is what spurred me to even think of the name of this podcast and us starting this podcast. Like this influenced this a lot.
The hardest part for me in that article was where I think in the weeks or months before she passed, and she didn't know, I don't know if she knew she had cancer yet. She like sent him a text message kind of reaching out, like, you know, and he apparently never contacted her from then on. And I wonder if he knew that she was really sick and didn't want to be part of it, basically, because he just ghosted her, basically.
Yeah.
Which is just so heartbreaking to me. And then she ended up passing away a few months later. And yeah, since then, I think there's like the whole Plotter series podcast that he has, trying to come after the woman, Ashley Foster, who I believe was trying to, I guess, speak out after Stephanie passed away, kind of like in her defense or in her name, you know? And I think he just, I don't know, the way that was handled was not very kind, in my opinion, on his end.
Well, he went after the people who were trying to speak up on her behalf
in a very defensive way.
Yeah, I mean, he published a podcast series,
way.
trying to shut them down. How is it called? The
Plotter series. It is a dumpster fire. I do not recommend listening to it. It is so stressful because it's this like very middle school energy of like this catty, petty, like negative, like I couldn't. I listened to a little bit of it and it was painful for me to listen to. And it frankly is a different side of him that he's showing in that too, which is helpful to see, I guess. So
yeah, that I think it's important for people to look at the Vanity Fair article to know that her friends after her death tried to speak up for her. He went after them with this podcast series, and that's not the only case of people who have had negative experiences and have tried to speak up and say something.
Right.
Do you want to talk about
Yeah, this other one is like hard for me to talk about. So I'm not going to go really into detail, but you can read the show notes. It's a mom. Her name is Kate, and we have her blog linked that was published in 2016. So that was pretty, I guess, early on in his, if he published his first book in 2015, this wasn't long after. It was when he was still doing phone consultations. And this was hard for me to find. I had to like dig, search very specific terms to find it. And her son was very ill, her young child, and she decided as a last ditch effort to do a phone consult with Anthony and see if spirit could diagnose him. And I think she realized, she was like, this is ridiculous, but I'm going to try anything, which of course is how it works when you have a loved one that's suffering. And what she said is that he spent the first 10 minutes or so talking about supplements, the history of supplements, his brands that he prefers, what supplements help with what. So it's like very supplement heavy. And then he told her that the source of her son's issues was mercury, and that it was from her when she was pregnant with him, and she passed the mercury to him, and she was the cause of his physical, neurological, and developmental issues. And yeah, so he had mercury poisoning from her, and also that all of her struggles with infertility were because of her mercury poisoning. He also told her she had Epstein-Barr virus, and then it was like on with the supplements and all the supplements she needs to take, her son needs to take. And this was an expensive appointment for her. So she was really hoping that eventually he would get to it and say, like, this is what's wrong, this is what you need to do. And it like wasn't getting to that point, and it was all about supplements. I will say that he does recommend supplements from a friend's supplement company, and he has a lot of Amazon affiliate links, and I'm assuming he does probably make profit off
tons of money.
Yeah.
Tons and tons and tons of money off those affiliate links.
She also said her son did pass away. And after he did, this makes me so angry. It's like hard for me to even say it out loud. I mean, all of it does, but this specifically, after her son passed away, he somehow found out about it. I don't know how. She said maybe on her blog, she had like a popular blog, or on social media. And Anthony Williams' assistant called and said that he requested that she call him. And she goes on to say that she did not appreciate being summoned by him when right after her son passed away. And I'm just like, what in the, like, really? Like this guy, like how just the.
I think this is the part so of angry. like even sometimes when I talk to Andrew about, different influencers that I see, he's like, you get so wound up. And I'm like, yeah, okay. There are these many different reasons that I get wound up. When I read about Stephanie Tizone or this woman, Kate, and her son, it's like, this is what the result can be. Hopefully it never goes this far. But when people are in the state of needing help, especially with their health, and we are in a desperate situation, not just personally, but publicly, like it's obvious in the United States, we do not have access to what we need. This can be the result. And when you have influence in any way, the responsibility that comes with is so great. That's it. Period. You have a responsibility. It becomes much different than business then. It's hard, though, for people who aren't in this realm to realize health is a $1 trillion industry. It is industry. But the connection between industry and life and death it's tragic. Yeah. That is tragic. And I'm with you, Hannah. I mean, Stephanie's story specifically hits really close to home for me. I'm like the mammogram advocate. Like I've influenced so many of my friends, like, go get your mammogram. I will come with you. Do breast checks. Ask your partner to do breast checks. Like, get this part figured out. And that's just based on my experiences in Northern California, where so many of the women that I was around had breast cancer or died from breast cancer. To think that there's this son of a bitch out there who is influencing this woman directly or indirectly, and did not directly say to her, go to a doctor immediately, or to come out publicly and say, get your mammograms or get checked or whatever you feel comfortable with, get ultrasound. Thermography is a different topic. We're not even that's a whole other episode, is to me morally, and it should be legally criminal. Like this guy can get fucked, in my opinion, based on that. It might be more than even just this one woman. This is the one woman that we know of. Then on top of it, asking this mom to call him or going after her friends who rightfully were trying to stand up for her.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah, we're going to call him out by name. That is the bottom line of why we're saying his name and letting people, hopefully, whatever small influence we have, know, avoid this person. This is dangerous.
It is extremely dangerous. And I mean, there's just more and more, the deeper you dig, controversy surrounding him, negative things, like, for one, the accusations of buying reviews, I guess. Buying is quote unquote, but I think basically running contests to encourage people to leave a positive review, kind of Amazon review.
For his book. Yeah, like in exchange for like a contest entry.
Right.
Yeah. Look, we just ran that giveaway.
Yeah.
And we actually had the discussion like, okay, could we just ask people to leave an honest review, whatever they think, good or bad, give us feedback. But even that, we decided not to do it because we didn't want to kind of like push people in that direction.
Right.
But yeah, to say like, hey, if you leave a 5-star review, then you're going to be entered into this contest. There's motivation behind that review that doesn't have anything to do with the spirit of why you're leaving a review in the first place.
Exactly.
It's totally different.
And it comes down to the sole motivation for him is to have lots of 5-star reviews. So he looks really good. And especially to counteract any maybe 1-star reviews. And instead of, using that information to better yourself or take it in a humble way, like maybe I should address these things because I am advising on these people. Maybe I should listen to these people and the negative criticism or, constructive criticism they have and just being like, no, that's not true. I'm going to get something to fix that average and get it back to 5 stars. That's very dishonest.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something you said, Hannah. When we were not recording earlier, which is like his personal persona seems like it's different than his public persona.
Yes.
To me, that's telling in a way. We all have our personal lives. Like I'm different a little bit off camera or off mic than I am on mic, but not a lot. It's like the skew, I think, that you pointed out, that's part of why this is disturbing. And you can see that in those texts, that he was sending to Stephanie Tizone that were published in Vanity Fair, in which when I read like analysis of that article, one of the big points that the person writing made is that it's pretty rare that a journalist gets text messages from somebody who has died. And it was like this massive insight into her communication with him and her interactions. And we get to see that then. It's like, oh, okay, this is how he's acting when it's not public. So in that way, it's like, of course you want 5-star reviews if you want your public persona to look a lot different than what's happening in your personal life.
Yeah, the texts were hard. That's when I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is very rude. He's very rude to this woman who is basically just doing anything he asks. She is a loyal person to him and considers him, seems like almost a best friend. And the way he speaks to her in the text messages is painful for me to read. It's very, it's just not nice, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like
unkind.
Like there's this like vibe that happens sometimes with like the person that's on top and then the team that's working for them, and it's ridiculous, like it can be short, it can be kind of rude, it can be like there's very
the superiority that's very blatant.
Yeah, not personal. And it's like maybe she was nuts too. We have no idea who this woman was, but it's like if that's not somebody you want to be interacting with, don't interact with them, but it seemed like there was this like friendship that was there, and at least like a working relationship that it just seems off. But then, okay,
Yeah.
you found this thing like with his, like the way he would like basically like micromanage and organize the people around him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I believe that there's like a practitioner database of like his like inner circle. Also in the Vanity Fair article, it's mentioned based on
I
one of
did see
those
that.
inner circle people that they interviewed, that it's kind of like he has this close that I mean the inner circle, but everyone in the inner circle is kind of forbidden from talking about their relationship with him. So it
Mm-hmm.
creates this secrecy and I'm imagining kind of competitiveness of like
Mm-hmm.
who's his true like best friend or best, favorite person, and you just don't know
Mm-hmm.
because it's kind of guarded.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that is really concerning.
Yeah, it just seems
And it
manipulative
very
and
manipulative. And it does remind me again, I don't want to like say he's like a cult leader, but there's like a lot of parallels
mm-hmm.
between this type of behavior that you're seeing as we research this and what, is kind of recognized as more
Cult-like behavior.
occult like behavior. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of like somebody might not have an eating disorder, but there's some type of disordered eating happening. Like
Hmm.
it's a very apropos analogy where it really seems like, yeah, there is behavior here that looks so much like what we're reading about with cults,
Hmm.
these like checklists that really experienced people have provided that's, common traits of cult leaders or cults. What's that saying? If it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck,
Wax like yeah, it's a
it might
duck.
be a duck. um, okay, so there's going to be part 2 of this podcast just because we still want to go through the evidence. Like, is there any evidence to back what he's saying? What is maybe worthwhile? What is just absolutely out to lunch? And then I think people probably can understand already what our takeaway would be. Also, I don't think we explicitly said our bias, but I can say mine. I think you should avoid this person and anyone like him, or that even
Yes.
people in that practitioner. He's got this like practitioner circle, or the website that we looked at where is it mmfriendly.com, where there are
Right.
actually lists of clinicians, some MDs, some DOs who they subscribe to his ideas.
I would stay away from that with a 10-foot pole. Like,
Yeah.
if you have a doctor who's recommending you to read his books and take his advice, um, that is questionable, in my
Highly
opinion.
questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, we'll dig in more in part 2 to the evidence and the takeaway.
All right.
I'll see you then.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.